everyone. Welcome to this episode of Tea and Chi. And today, our guest is Nick Loffree, a Qigong instructor. So, for anyone who doesn't know you already, what is a bit of how you got into Qigong and who you are as a person in general, Nick?
Sure. Well, let's see. Yeah, my life right now is just teaching Qigong mostly online, a lot on YouTube these days, which the pandemic was kind of a big blessing in helping me shift my business over to that. So it's all online these days, and it's really enjoyable. I go outside, I make videos. I go to like national parks with iconic backgrounds of mountains and stuff, and I got pretty good at filming outdoors and making it look all pretty. So it's kind of like you're in a nature documentary while you're getting your little Qigong workout. Um, so I really like where my life's gotten, but the way I got here was a lot rougher. I went through a paranoid psychosis, basically like schizophrenia, when I was between like 17 and 21, basically. And the way I got there was super weird, and it's kind of some of the disillusionment I got from that is why I got into Qigong and things like Qigong, these kind of esoteric things that a lot of people might look down on as this kind of woo-woo thing with this imaginary thing we call Qi and all that. But I got into it because I really experienced things along those lines, and and then wound up in this kind of medical system where none of that was real, and they just wanted to treat you chemically with a bunch of drugs and not really talk about the experiences I had had in this kind of esoteric world that made no sense to me, but which nonetheless, I knew a lot of these experiences were real. And so I went up with this kind of paranoia where I had like one foot in this sort of mystical world of like psychic experiences and stuff, and another foot in the kind of mainstream world where I'm having these psychiatrists talk to me and tell me, oh, none of this is real. And so I wind up just super paranoid just because it's like I know that certain like psychic abilities and stuff are possible because I'd experienced them, and I had no idea what the limitations were or whether they could be controlled or anything like that. And I wound up getting very paranoid that just these things were just happening all the time, and that paranoia just kind of spun me out of control to the point where I was just hearing voices and things all the time that weren't, it really wasn't real. And so I went up just straddled between these worlds where it's like, okay, I know I'm paranoid and I'm having that paranoia has led to these experiences that aren't real, but that feel real. But I also know I've had these kind of mystical experiences that were real and that I could verify with other people and things like that. And so on the one hand, I'm being like drugged for the paranoia. And on the other hand, I know some of this was real and I want to explore it. And so I wound up getting into meditation and things like that and yoga initially. This was all like 12, 13 years ago. And basically, I thought, like, oh, well, meditation, the whole point is like mastering your mind. So whether I'm crazy and I need to heal my mind, that'll probably work for that. Or whether I'm not crazy and some of this shit is real, this will help me to gain some mastery in that realm and maybe understand it a little better. And I basically spent several years exploring meditation and yoga and eventually some like with nutrition and stuff, because what happened was these pills I was taking for psychosis were making me like extremely physically unhealthy. So I got eczema and acne, like pretty much most of my body was covered in skin conditions. Like my digestion wasn't working. My liver was so toxic that breathing, just the act of my diaphragm touching my liver, was painful. And so I had all this like physical stuff going on, and so I was like, well, now I really need to heal something. And so I got into nutrition and things like that too, and eventually found Qigong and met my Qigong teacher, who was the first person I'd met in this whole journey. It took me like, I think, 5 years into this journey I found him in Qigong, and he was the first person I found who actually helped me to make sense of these kind of like psychic experiences and stuff I'd had. Turned out he was a medium. He doesn't talk about this a lot. He's kind of a famous Qigong teacher. People in your world might have heard of him. His name's Lee Holden. And he's famous for kind of making Qigong like very accessible, like kind of modernizing it for like Western people, Western minds. But if you look behind the curtain, him as a person is so much deeper, and it has had so much crazy experiences that he doesn't really talk about publicly. But one of them is that he's a medium, and so he actually like talks to ghosts of their dead relatives of people he knows and stuff like that. He actually met his children before his wife became pregnant with them. All kinds of weird stuff like this. So he kind of knew how to integrate a lot of that stuff and helped me to use Qigong to integrate it, and really helped me to find that balance that I was looking for. So pretty wild ride.
Yeah, it's amazing to be able to be that vulnerable and honest about your experience and about your sort of dark night of the soul. And something that I want to touch on with that is that in this modern world that we live in, insecurity can turn into, because it's a vulnerability, insecure. You're not secure. A person is not secure in who they are or what they believe, what they're experiencing. That's vulnerability. And there are so many snakes and wolves, metaphorically, in this world that just take advantage of that. And you experienced something similar to myself when I had been led into real scary moment in my life with that dark night of the soul, and really paranoid, a bit delusional. And I remember the main theme within that was this overwhelming pressure to conform to external belief systems. And coming full circle from that, in that dark night of the soul around 2012, 2013, where I was in a very similar situation to you, just getting really whipped around by people's opinions, ultimately. And a lot of those opinions were fear-based. And a lot of those opinions wanted to make money. And a lot of those opinions had a certain agenda. So when we exit this sort of insecure space of wanting to find external validation, we end up internal. And that's what I heard was your experience with finding Qigong and finding your teacher was all a path about coming back to that internal self and that internal validation and that internal energy. And that's such an important way to live, internally validating, becoming the internal authority, the author of your life, rather than letting external authorities, authors, write in your life. Because you see on the graffiti on the walls and in the public bathroom stalls, when people are given that authority, people will write bullshit, people will write curses, people will write all sorts of messed up stuff into your life because it's not theirs. They don't have to live it. So they think that they're free from that karma. So that's something that really is more prevalent also than people realize, that sort of not finding acceptance of belief system within the family unit or within the social unit or within the media or mass media unit. And then someone feeling as though because their idea doesn't conform to a Western reality or a Western vision of reality, then they're crazy or this or that or the other thing, which is all ultimately bullshit, right? Because nobody really knows what's going on. Like, science is right for a little bit and then it's proven wrong and they have to come up with something else. So it was an idea and it was wrong. Same thing with spirituality or with anything related to esoteric,
Yeah, and
mystical
I think
arts.
there's a really good historical reason for that too, which is that science developed in sort of opposition to the church in Europe, and so there's kind of this like culture that developed in like the scientific world where is like, oh, like spirituality is over there and science is here, and the spiritual people are trying to sort of oppress us and not let us do our work, because back in the day it was the scientists were the underdogs, right? And this kind of happens a lot. There'll be like a group that is the underdog throughout history for a while, and then eventually they become the top dog, but they don't change their behavior to reflect that. They still act with this kind of chip on their shoulder, right? And don't reacclimatize. Like, okay, now I'm the top dog. I have to act in a responsible way that reflects
Mm.
that, and kind of pull the punches a little more. And so I think like science has become the dominant sort of, let's say, mythology, um, or way of viewing the world in the West, and it's kind of kept this kind of chip on its shoulder towards spirituality and things like that. And as a result, I think are close-minded towards a lot of things. So yeah, for instance, like when I was in the mental hospital and talking to like psychiatrists, I tried to conduct scientific experiments with them. I was like, look, so I had experiences with telepathy. I know some of them are real. I'm pretty sure some of them I'm just paranoid. So why don't we just run an experiment? I'm just going to write a number on this piece of paper. I'll try to send it to you, and let's just see if you can guess it, right? And no psychiatrist I could find would run this experiment with me. They're all just like, no, you're crazy. Just trust us that telepathy doesn't exist. And well, we won't even do this like short experiment that would literally take 5 seconds, and instead we're going to give you this drug with this huge list of side effects instead of doing actual science, right? And so sometimes science like isn't actually even living by its own code. Like the code of science is like everything's up in the air, like it's all unknown, it's all there to be disproved. We can look at anything and try to disprove it, but it's sort of like the idea that like they often people often are under this spell of, because something hasn't been proven, that disproves it, right? Because we haven't proven it exists yet, it means we've disproven it. But that's really antithetical to what science is supposed to mean, I feel like. Not a
Yeah, that's
scientist.
such a key point, and it's the same with certain religions, like as you said, the sort of duality, the dichotomy that's happened between religion and science,
Mm,
whereas a lot of religion has a lot of hypocrisy, and now a lot of
right.
science has a lot of hypocrisy because there's so much financial input.
Right.
And this is why personally I'm I love science for what it produces, but I ascribe myself much more towards the spiritual, the Taoist, because ultimately faith is key. We have to have faith, we have to have trust in something. And when you put it in science, when somebody puts their faith into science, then they're putting it into something that uh, is always kind of up in the air. Like you don't really know. It's not like a solid rock, you know? If
Mm-hmm.
I put faith in myself and if I put faith in my chi, my energy, and
Mm-hmm.
science as well has proven energy, but like you said, will also combat somebody who's saying they're using chi,
Mm-hmm.
but they'll say, no, 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 no. You don't have an aura, but an aura is just a toroidal field, a torus field of energy that has already been something that science has proven. So
Mm-hmm.
when you have that sort of unwavering foundational faith, you can build up a heightened sense of awareness. And there's a beautiful quote from, I believe it's the Tao Te Ching, but it might be the I Ching. It's a Taoist text, so we're talking about Qigong practitioners here. There's an ancient Taoist text that says, if the Tao or the way it's called is like talking about mysterious, mystical energy of the universe that no one can describe. And in trying to describe it, I just made it indescribable. But if the Tao were not called crazy or ridiculous, it would not be the mysterious supernatural Tao. So what that basically is saying is that if your mystical experiences, your telepathy, your prophetic dreams, your mediumship were mainstream, normal, everybody loved it, everybody knew about it, there wouldn't be that mysterious kind of mystical nature to it. And that's the beauty of Qigong, I found, is that I'm not going to go up to a stranger and just say, I'm utilizing my chi to transmit energy out of my hands, and I'm visualizing rainbow light flooding into your heart chakra to make your day have more vitality.
Yeah.
But I can still do it mysteriously. And then all of that sudden I'm looking at that exact person and they light up and go, oh. Or just before, when I'm playing basketball, just before we got on this call, utilizing my mind power and my chi to go like this and just move the ball into the hoop to get me that dopamine kick. But yeah, so I would love to now shift into a little bit lighter topic.
Sure.
What kind of tea are you drinking, brother?
Well, I gave away all my tea stuff. I just moved from California to Idaho, to the Rocky Mountains, and it's about $3,000 to rent a moving van to leave California, and only $500 to go the other way, renting a moving van, because so many people are leaving California these days.
Oh, wow.
So I didn't want to shell out $3,000, so we decided to give away almost all our stuff and just put all our stuff into like an SUV and come here. And so one of the stuff I gave away was all my teaware, which I was bummed about, but I was also like, I'll get new. What a good opportunity to get all new teaware. So I'll have to get some eventually. But right now I'm drinking some green tea from Costco or something in a camping mug. So not very Taoist. Yeah.
Humble tea.
But it's still clearing my brain nicely.
Yeah. Gonna now blow Nick's tea out of the water with
nice
indigo teas from Glastonbury, a very sacred place in the United Kingdom. Ginkgo Biloba tea leaves, 100% dried Ginkgo Biloba leaves.
Nice.
So
good
a little bit
brain,
about
right?
Yes, the Ginkgo tree is a magnificent tree, and the genus Ginkgo, so the genus of the species Ginkgo tree, is 270 million years old.
Whoa. Oh
my God. The tea leaves help with your memory. So it's like it's an ancient tree, and it helps with your memory. If that's not mystical.
What about the individual trees? Do the individual trees live a long time?
That's my next powerful point here, is that in China, there is said to be a living ginkgo tree that is 3,500 years old.
Oh my God.
So this
is that the oldest tree in the world?
Who knows? I think even
the California redwoods, the oldest ones, are like 2,000 years or something.
Jeez.
But that's pretty crazy. That's like as old as civilization. That's wild.
Yeah, it's far out. And I mean, Taoism itself is so intertwined with this beautiful Chinese tree, and in taking this as medicine, no side effects, right? So the side effect is it boosts your memory and it helps with your cognitive function and helps you relax and all these things. So my great
All right. Well,
grandfather.
you're gonna have to send me a link for that. Maybe we should put a link for the people watching for where they can
Oh
buy that
yeah,
because
we'll
I kind
give
of want to get
a
some.
nice shout out for Indigo Herbs of Glastonbury. We love that town. It's a magic wizard town.
Cool. So, you're living in England. It sounds. Do you have an American accent? Are you from America?
So I'm originally from New York.
Okay.
I am a New Yorker. That's why I get right to the point. Usually blunt and
Nice.
know what I want for the most part and do what I can to claim it. so
Nice.
so yeah, there's a lot of people that get eaten up energetically
Mhm.
by New York. And I'm sure that you had that experience. Were you born and raised in California?
No, I was raised in Toronto, Canada, so not too
Ah,
far from you actually. And I moved to Santa Cruz, California, because that's where my Qigong teacher was, who I was learning with online. And then in 2014, I moved to California to study with him.
nice.
Santa
So
Cruz is a cool place, yeah, but incredibly expensive. It's like Silicon Valley's like surf town. So everything there is just crazy expensive. So I was like, I love nature. Where can I live that's cheaper but still beautiful? So just came to the Rocky Mountains. It's a little cheaper.
nice. Yeah,
But yeah,
big.
California, I mean, people there are super nice. It's kind of intense. It's like intense, but everybody's got a smile.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the first things I noticed in Idaho, which is like pretty small population, it's like a state with like a million, it's only like a million people in the whole state, was that everybody in customer service here was being friendly, but it was so much more genuine than I was used to. Like, like they seemed to be legitimately happy just to like be having a job and interacting with people, whereas in like California, Toronto, like it's all very intense and like I always felt like the customer service niceness was kind of very on the surface,
Hmm.
and but underneath you can tell everybody's like very stressed about I guess how their money like doesn't go very far. People are working 2, 3 jobs and stuff. Um, but here it just seems very genuine. The joy of even a coffee shop worker or something.
Yeah, it's pretty wide open, and having been from New York as well as big city like Toronto, makes makes me kind of look back and say, if only I had had a Qigong teacher when I was a kid or a
Mm,
teenager, because even to this day, people get swallowed up, eaten up
yeah,
by the beast of the Northeast, this kind of capitalist onslaught of energy, because everything's
yeah, it's
energy,
very
we know
very go
this.
go go, right?
Yeah, very go, go, go. And
Yeah. Actually,
the,
the people here, even if you change your license plates, they know if you're from California based on how you drive.
yeah,
Because if you're the Californians are all in a rush all the time, they're like weaving through everybody.
yes, when I lived in Hawaii for 2 years, there was uh, really slowed me down.
Yeah.
And something that was really touching was that the Hawaiians would get pissed. The locals would get pissed if somebody's driving fast, especially
Well,
down like a road, a residential road.
yeah.
And it was because the culture is so loving, so aloha, that the consciousness around it was there's
You're gonna hurt
kids
somebody.
there's kids all over this island. There's
Yeah.
kids that are local, kids that are on vacation.
Yeah.
And if you're driving fast, that means that you think you're getting somewhere on time is more important than a kid's life. And that
Yeah.
was just, it was just, now I I carry that Hawaiian energy when anywhere I go. I'll stare people down for going too fast, or I'll slow down. People are, and then I'll
Yeah.
fuse it with my New York energy. People are walking here. Just people,
Hey, people are
we're
walking
walking.
here.
Yeah.
Sounds like I got to go to Hawaii. That because what a good excuse to be late for everything. It's like now when it's like when you're late, it's like I'm just being a good person. I was trying to make sure all the kids survived on my way here.
Absolutely.
Got a
On
great excuse.
Hawaiian time.
Yeah, it's interesting cultures that it's so funny how within the same country there can be so many different little subcultures. But it's interesting the difference between a culture where like it's all about the rearing of children, like the whole culture just revolves around that, and you notice that here in Idaho. I think just generally places with like smaller population density probably tend more towards that. But yeah, it's an interesting difference the way people live when they're oriented towards raising children instead of kind of this like weird like hedonistic no responsibility like be a kid forever like mentality that seems to be like the dominant force I guess in our generation of like and I think a lot of times it's like, oh, I'm not gonna have kids because the environment or something. But I feel like most of the time that's just an excuse for like, I just want to party my whole life, party and
Yeah.
travel and stuff. Which no shame on people who don't want to have kids, but it's an interesting difference seeing the two different cultures.
Yeah, the whole population thing is a bunch of BS, like having too many people. Because it's if somebody has 12 kids,
Yeah,
but all those 12 kids plant 12,000 trees
right.
and work on a permaculture farm and create new solar panels, batteries that last
Yeah,
longer and are more efficient.
yeah,
Then and then somebody in the deep south, sorry, deep south, somebody in the deep south gives birth to one kid, and that
yeah,
kid drives diesel trucks up and down the country for no reason, goes to monster truck rallies, buys a bunch of alcohol, does
yeah,
a bunch of drugs, all this, and like all this stuff that's contributed, uses plastic for everything,
yeah,
disposable
yeah.
everything. Like, what is it, the population that's the problem, or like what the people are actually doing? And that's something
Yeah.
that I like to shift into talk about Qigong connection with nature. Because
Hmm.
when noticeably, when I started doing Qigong, when I started learning Qigong from my Qigong master, TJ Frank, was in feeling the energy of nature, I took care of it better.
Mm.
I've never been a person that's been polluting too much
Hmm.
or disrespecting nature, but when I started learning qigong, legitimately I could look at a flower and go, "Oh, I feel that flower. I
Yeah,
feel that that flower is a living conscious being, maybe a different consciousness than me, but it has an energy and it's living. And that livingness is sacred and I need to take care of that in some way." So what is a bit about your experience with that and how qigong has maybe changed or transformed your connection with nature?
great question. Yeah, the whole like Taoist tradition is like based around nature a lot, right? It kind of developed in relation to Confucianism, which was kind of like the city folk, like let's say it wasn't really a religion, but let's say like a religion, which is all about like hyper organizing people in like dense urban areas where people need to be more hyper organized to be efficient. And Taoism was kind of this escape back to the countryside, back to where nature was. And they do a lot of these kind of paintings where it's all about nature. And sometimes there's like this some kind of tiny little like stick figure of a person somewhere in the corner. But like the main theme is the nature. Um, I was always into nature. When I was a kid, I wanted to make nature documentaries for a living, and I kind of laugh now how funny it is how close my life wound up to that kind of by accident.
Hmm.
But yeah, I remember when I was a kid, we would go camping all the time, my family, and I remember a lot of experiences where like I'd be like laying on a rock next to a lake in the sun, and I would have this experience where like I would feel like the earth was another person that I was like feeling intimate with. Like it was like I was like absorbing into the earth. And I don't remember thinking of it much of it at the time, except like how amazing it felt. But it was interesting how close Qigong like recreated that experience, basically. But what I find with Qigong and nature is nature like just really amplifies Qigong. So if you're doing Qigong like in your room, like it's one thing, but if you're doing it like with the sunset out on in a forest or something, like it's just a more amazing experience. And for me, it kind of speaks to like how we could change some of the messaging around environmentalism to appeal to more people, because
Hmm.
a lot of it is this kind of like self-flagellation. Like, it's you're going to be more strict, more disciplined, use the right kind of straw. Blah, blah, blah. It's like all this like work you're going to do, and it's all because like the earth is more important than you, or like humans bad, nature good kind of thing. Whereas I think we should view nature as something that amplifies human life and not
Hmm.
something um, like inanimate rocks. And like we don't have, like, some of us are going to have these esoteric experiences of like connecting to Mother Earth, but that's going to be like a small percentage of people, I think, who are like more on like the mystical side, who have like the shaman gene or whatever it is that opens you to those experiences. I think most people, we just need to message it like nature's amazing. It's going to improve your life. Like nature is this beautiful playground that we all get to enjoy. It's this like free thing. You can go camping. It's like the cheapest vacation ever, but it's so much fun. Clean air makes you healthier. Clean water makes your life better. Your kids' minds work better when there's not lead in the water, right? When the fish aren't full of microplastics, your kids aren't getting endocrine disruptors in them that are screwing with their puberty and things like that. So if you look at like who is pro environment, it's people of like the liberal temperament who their whole kind of moral framework is about caring for others, right? It's like, oh, let's take care of this people, let's protect the earth, let's protect these minorities. It's all about this kind of like mother consciousness of like protecting and caring for these like things or people that you see as like needing that kind of shelter. Whereas the conservatives, who are kind of the ones dragging their heels on environmentalism, their thing is like personal duty, responsibility, you know, putting up strong barriers around things. And so studies have actually shown that if you show a conservative um, a picture of a forest that's being deforested, like all the trees have been cut down, versus if you show them a forest that is a beautiful forest, but it's full of trash, like people have littered all over it, they're going to have a stronger emotional response to want to do something about the forest full of garbage.
Hmm.
And this actually goes to a difference in the brain, like actual genetic brain structure between people who tend towards more conservative mindset or more liberal mindset. And people with a conservative mindset have a higher what's called disgust sensitivity. And so that's the part of your brain that will like react to like, seeing like a pile of shit or like just something that is like disgusting, but also even moral disgust, like seeing something that you find morally disgusting actually triggers the same part of the brain. And so if you frame environmentalism as, oh, look at how dirty things are becoming. Look how dirty the ocean is with plastic. Look how dirty the forests are with litter. Look how dirty the rivers are with pollution, and how that's like getting into your kids. All this is poisoning your kids and all that kind of stuff. Conservatives are more likely to respond to that message than, oh, poor Mother Earth. We got to take care of Mother Earth, something like that. So, and I think Qigong can kind of tie in with that. You know, if part of Qigong is, oh, part of my Qigong practice is once in a while I go out to nature and the beauty of nature amplifies my Qigong experience, then we start to see nature as something we want to keep clean, we want to protect, we want to preserve for really just selfish reasons. And I think tying things to your own self interest is the way to get the majority of people on board.
Hmm. There's so many good points that you just hit on, but I want to personally encourage you to continue to bring your dream into reality with your excellent qigong videos, merging in uh, maybe some talks or something about
Great idea.
nature and weave it in with Taoism. That would be excellent. And I loved what you said about how certain people aren't going to see a David Attenborough film and be like, oh yeah, I need to do this for the world and I need to be more disciplined and stuff. most people are just out for themselves, whether they know it or not, just because we've been trained to act that way.
Hmm.
So the way you described it felt like, oh wow, even that person who's so stuck in their ego is going to be like, oh wow, I want to try out some qigong and help out the
Exactly.
planet because it's going to do this and that for me and it's going to
Yeah.
improve my life in that way. And it's, I mean, it's kind of sad from a humanitarian social perspective to be like people are that disconnected from nature and from each other that, oh, if I'm not getting some benefit out of it, then I don't care about qigong or I don't care about nature. So,
Yeah.
but on the other hand, it's like who isn't in it for themselves in some way? We all are to
Mhm.
survive. We have
Yeah.
to accumulate food. We have to accumulate clean water, and
Yeah.
depending on our uh, tribe, our culture, how we treat each other, it's easier or harder to
Hmm.
do that, to fulfill those needs. Something I've experienced with Qigong is that the needs seem to be met in a more mysterious and deeply fulfilling way. And in trying to explain it, it's not really something that is comprehensible. But it's like because I've amplified my own energy and because I've tuned into my electromagnetic field, my aura, my Taurus, whatever you want to call it, I can sort of call in things that I need
Mm.
uh, with this sort of selfless samadhi that's like understanding that the ginkgo tree and I are one. And if we
Mm.
connect, there's an exchange of energy, or
Mm.
the grass and I are one, the beach, the ocean and I are one. And if we connect in some way, there's going to be a beneficial exchange of energy. And that reminded me a bit of what you were talking about earlier with your dark night of the soul, was in your experience of wanting external validation of these mystical experiences. From a more mature perspective, now we're both coming from, I would just love for everyone to, who's listening to this, to internally validate. It's so key and it can help so many people's lives. I just want to get this message out there. When you have a mystical experience, my Reiki master taught this. When you have a mystical experience, when you have something that's so special to you that happened energetically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, keep it to yourself. Keep it in. Don't share it so willingly with others because not everyone has good intentions for you. And not everyone is ready to hear the wisdom or the energy or the miracle that happened in your life. But luckily, we do have certain people in life we can share that. And that creates more
Yeah.
intimacy and more uh, safe vulnerability. And I would just love to urge everyone to sort of take that self-worth into account where they're valuing not just their physical treasures but their spiritual treasures and really keeping them safe and not sharing their spiritual treasures so wildly and randomly in the world, because that's kind of what people get caught up in with if they get considered to be a bit far out or a bit out of the mind, is they're just, oh, did you hear I just traveled through time in my mind, and like in in their mind they visited a certain time and space. But if you're outwardly just choo choo choo
Yeah.
choo sending out all your mystical information, people, somebody's going to be an asshole about it and be like, you're fucking
Yeah.
crazy, you should go get help or whatever. And
Yeah.
so that, yeah, that's an important thing that I wanted to get out there.
Yeah. Yeah. And we don't want to tie our egos to some idea of ourselves as like
Mm,
somebody with like special powers or something, because you do need discernment. And it's hard to tell. It's like, how do you know you traveled back in time? How do you know you sent a telepathic message and somebody else actually received, you know? And like it's easy for the mind to trick us, right? But those things are also real. And so it's like you're constantly doing this balancing act between you want to be able to acknowledge it if it's real and make use of it or something. But you also don't want to like start making it your ego about it and like I'm the guy with the special powers and I'm gonna try and convince everybody, and then because you start believing yourself and by trying to say something to convince others, you kind of accidentally wind up convincing yourself, and you're gonna lose some of that like discernment. And I think this is why like we have this hole in our culture, and it kind of goes back to this like dichotomy between the scientific and spiritual, where I think most other cultures like have some kind of like integration where if you had some experience like this, there would be, and let's say an authority figure, just somebody who's like knowledgeable in that sort of thing, who you could go to and they could help you make sense of it, right? And that is like absolutely missing in our culture.
Hmm.
Like, who did I have to go to? I had psychiatrists, and like they were not there to help me integrate; they were just there to medicate, right? But if I was in a tribe in the Amazon, there would be a shaman, and that would be like their whole thing, and they would help you to integrate and maybe learn how to use those abilities and how to understand them. Um, so I've had this kind of fantasy ever since that experience of like one day, like I don't know if you know X-Men, but there's like the Xavier Academy for like mutants or whatever. And their whole thing is like there's all these like kids who have these powers, they don't know how to control them, and they're freaking out. And so Professor Xavier like finds these kids and brings them and helps them to kind of like integrate it, learn to do something good with it. So I hope to do something like that one day, but I feel like it's pretty beyond my reach at this point. But
Yeah, we have a who knows how long it will be before we have the Jedi academies and the and, and these um, they exist in a way in the now moment, but the problem we have with that is exactly similar to what you were talking about with attaching the ego to being that something.
right.
Is the ego also attaches to owning something.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking about this today, is that back in time when things weren't so owned, there wasn't so much ego, there wasn't so much ideas about profit. When you had open land, people would just hang out with their friends, right? So like a village would be people who get along well with each other. And if they didn't get along well with each other, and this ties into Qigong as well, because we're all protons and neutrons kind of flying around, magnetizing to each other and repelling from each other in
Yeah.
energy space, yin yang.
Yeah.
So if somebody doesn't get along with that village, they'll go to another one. And then there's so much less issues. But in today's world, massive, gigantic, old money person family scoops up all the land, and you have to fight and claw to even think about having a little bit of my land, and even then you have to pay me taxes and pay me this and all these things, and it's so unnatural. But people don't see that sort of beast I was describing that exists in uh, capitalist, industrialist, modern places. Is there is an energy to this. There is an energy exchange happening that is unnatural,
Mm.
right? So you have these corporations or oil families, old slave wealth, people who had old like human trafficking wealth that has passed over through centuries. These people attach their egos and their energies to land and put this weird sort of barrier up consciously in people's minds that they think, oh, this person owns this land. But in reality, when they die and everyone who's associated with them dies, who owns the land? nobody nobody owns the land. But not having that sort of shamanic or guru or sifu, as we call it in Qigong, as you're describing, that void is such a good way of putting it, that hole, makes people not understand these basic things, like that we can't own anything because we have a limited experience on earth and we have only this much physical energy or jing until we die, and then our energy lives on as nature shows us, but we don't have those people. I mean, lucky we have exchange of information now, whereas we can share masterful guru sifu type wisdom with the world, so these voids are being filled. But there's people still subscribe to that sort of industrial era of consciousness that is really harming people's energy and people's minds as well.
Yeah, we live in a weird world, and I think you're touching on something really important, which is the disconnect between the environment we evolved in biologically as a species and the modern environment that we live in. And that has so many disconnects from like all the chemicals in the food we eat that we did not evolve with those chemicals, and they're all kind of new to us, to the all this weird kind of frequencies of light and EMF, like so much of the environment, and all the way to like the massive social structure that is totally foreign as humans. Like we tribes never had more than 150 people in them. Like that was all the people you knew, all the people you interacted with your whole life was like less than 150 people. And now we live in these massive conglomerations of human beings and have to interact with like, I mean, you're not even restricted to your country. Like the world is global now, and you're in this like giant tribe that includes pretty much like everybody within billions of people. And I think it's like way more stressful than we're used to. And now we're all connected on the internet. We're interacting with all these people and all these different judgments, and yeah, it's a lot on the system, and it's why we really need stuff like qigong. Like something has to cut through the complexity and return us to the simplicity. And like you were saying before about like um, being able to return to a place where it, like our confidence and our self-assurance is like self-reference and not dependent on other people. Like you are playing a losing game if your self-confidence, self-esteem is dependent on how other people see you, because you live in a world where there's like literally millions of different cultures, millions of different perspectives, and some percentage of those people are going to be looking at you through a lens that is not going to like anything you believe, anything you do, anything you wear. Like it's all going to be wrong to somebody, right? And so like it has to be self-referenced, and something qigong or just something like that just does such a good job of returning you to yourself. Because it's one thing to say, right? People say like, oh, just love yourself, like do self-love, right? But you need something, some actual tool to get there, right? And qigong just kind of resets the nervous system, clears away all the energy of all the other people's perspectives you've been interacting with, and just brings you back to that like stronger self, where now you're choosing, you're creating the energy and putting that out instead of all that energy coming in and influencing you. Now you, it makes you an influencer, right? Energy influencer. I'll put that on my resume now.
Energy influencer. That's make it. That was like a nice corny joke that I needed. Oh my goodness. I was clever. Yeah, I mean, the simplicity is something that really is a continual profound thing with qigong, which sounds very paradoxical, which it is because life is paradoxical. It's yin yang. It's balance of opposites, tai chi. It's like I can do this, right? Pull up the energy from earth, lift it up, pull down the energy from heavens, from the starlight. And then I just have this profound experience that is unexplainable to anyone else besides my soul.
Yeah.
And then I walk down the street. Oh, this is a great story. So I have Ginkgo Biloba Tea. 2 days ago, my wife and I are in the park, and I see this sign that says 100-something-year-old Ginkgo biloba tree brought over from China lives in this park. So I'm like, yes, I know ginkgo is good for the brain. I know all this like herbological wisdom about ginkgo. I'm gonna find this tree. I'm gonna pull in all the nutrients that has, make a tea out of it, out of the leaves. But I searched for about an hour, all while getting my wife angry at me because she's pregnant and she wants to go home, and I'm looking for an ancient Chinese tree that lives in this park. and I don't find it. I don't end up finding it. So I'm a bit upset, but it's fine. Go on my way. The next day, my wife meets somebody in town named Ginkgo.
Whoa.
And he's this old dude that's been to India and lived in the highlands of Scotland and had all these mystical experiences in Myanmar and all this stuff. And
Whoa.
he's just like connects with us, and he just moved to the town that we're living in. And yeah, it was so funny. I was looking for ginkgo, didn't find ginkgo, but found ginkgo. and then I
So
ordered
weird.
the tea. It arrives the next day.
Wow.
And it was just went back to the root of that mysterious, beautiful Taoist Qigong energy that transcends any idea that comes from China. There's people from other galaxies that are practicing Qigong, and they call it something else. There are people in the mountains of the Andes practicing Qigong, and they call it something else. It's just energy, and energy's omnipresent. So somewhere in my consciousness, in my soul, in this, whatever this is, magnetized to something else. And really it's one.
So weird.
It's really one thing. And the English language has a hard time keeping ego out of the language. But some part of me needed what the ginkgo tree had. And some part of what the ginkgo tree had needed a part of me. And so that happened. And then meeting a person with the same name, call it a confirmation, a psychic message. Maybe he personally is a soul avatar of the ginkgo tree itself, which is a much more shamanic Owen way of looking at it, much more medium way of looking at it.
Awesome.
But yeah, it's interesting. I wanted to ask you a bit about your teacher, because I know of Lee Holden. I've watched a bit of his work. I hear great things about him. But the interesting thing is that there's a parallel between him and myself, whereas I've gotten quite popular now as a medium, as a psychic, which is in my Instagram name, Oracle Owen. That's what people seem to magnetize to me for. I offer a lot of different things, but for some reason, people come and want to see the Oracle.
Interesting.
So I would love to ask you a bit more about your experience with Lee Holden and what your teacher has meant to you in your life.
Yeah. He's a super interesting guy because he's like as all American as you can get. Like, he was like a varsity soccer player, went to college on a soccer scholarship. So he's kind of like a bro, like he's like a surfer and stuff. But then there's this other side of him where he's like very energetically sensitive, and he's very interesting the way he like brings those two personalities together. But yeah, I basically I found him because I was really into yoga, and I got so into it actually in 2012. I don't know if 2012 was a crazy year for you, but it was like this year of like huge shifts for me, and like total I wasn't like, oh, it's 2012, I'm going to change everything. It was just all this stuff was just happening. But during that year, I'd been doing yoga for a few years, and I was like, gosh, I want to be a yoga teacher. And so I went and did a yoga teacher training, and it was kind of like me and like 20 like beautiful women. So I was trying to like impress everybody the whole time, and so I'm like pushing myself really hard through all these yoga practices, and I could feel like a lot of my joints and stuff saying like, hey, like kind of feels like you're tearing your tendons right now, and I was like, oh, that's probably just like a really intense stretch, so I'll just keep going. And I did like 20 days of this, like my body just screaming at me and me just pushing anyways, and which was so dumb because like the whole theme of the yoga program was like, oh, listen to your body, and so I came out with like not like well, some permanent injuries, but mostly just like tendonitis and stuff. And so I had to take a pretty long break from yoga. So I took like a 3 year break actually. Um, but basically around that time, I was working at a gym, and there was like a Bagua teacher there who like did Chinese medicine and acupuncture and stuff too. And I never did any of his stuff, but it looked really cool. I just saw like the pictures and stuff. I'm like, what the hell is this? He was calling it like martial medicine, and I had no idea what it was. And he was just like, I think you'd really like Qigong. Just like try this video. And he sent me like this like 7 minute YouTube video from one of Lee's DVDs. And I tried it, and it was kind of like yoga because like you're moving in conjunction with your slow breathing, right? But instead of the focus being like all on stretching, it was like just like movement with breath, and that was like so new to me. I'm like, really, you can just move with the breath? You don't have to like stretch or like do sit-ups or something with it. And I was so amazed just like how like 7 minutes made me feel. Like I was like, man, I feel like better than like after like an hour of yoga. Like my whole body just felt like it was made of cotton. I was so calm, so relaxed. And so I just got hooked like right away and started just ordering DVDs. And it grabbed me so much, largely because of how much it was about nature. Like it was all the movements were like, oh, you're holding the tree, or you're connecting to the stars, or there's all this stuff like that. And it was really bringing back this like side of myself that was so into nature. But I did it for a little while, and finally I was like, you know what, I should like do an actual coaching session with this teacher. And it was kind of expensive because he's kind of famous, but I got some money together and I did it. And when I was talking to him, I was like, yeah, sometimes like when I'm really exhausted, like doing a day of like landscaping, which is like my job at the time, I'm like, and I'm coming home on the bus. Like it seems like the more exhausted my energy is, the more sensitive I feel. Like it always feels like I can just tune into like how other people on the bus are feeling, and not like I can read their mind, but just like I'm getting these like intuitive pulses from them of like this low resolution information. And at the time, I was like, and I think I'm crazy. It's like my psychosis coming back or something. And he's kind of listening to me, like, yeah, okay. And I think basically, like, he just was feeling my energy, like, through the call, basically, even though it's like Skype on the other side of a continent. And he's like, yeah, so your chi field is basically like porous. So, like, energy is just going in and out. And when you're exhausted, you have even less energy to put into that chi field as like a protective barrier, basically. And so everything is just going in and out, like, whether you wanted to or not. And then also, like, you're a guy who kind of like lives in his heart a lot, and the heart is a very like sensitive organ. So that has you kind of feeling a lot. And so basically what he taught me to do was like build my chi, shift the chi from the heart to more like the lower dantian, where you're kind of more grounded within yourself and not in this kind of very sensitive place, which was so counter to like what I felt like a lot of the spiritual stuff was, which is all about, oh, raise the energy up to open the heart, be more expansive, be more sensitive, be more open. And it was kind of like this total opposite thing of like, bring the energy down, be more grounded, sink the chi, go inside, and then take some of that energy and put it into the field. So you feel kind of a more density around yourself. And he kind of just taught me some exercises. We did them over Skype. And while we were doing them, one of them was to kind of compress the chi field. So you literally put your hands on your aura and you squeeze it so that instead of being like big and porous, it gets kind of dense. And I was so amazed, like how much I was able to feel that. Like it was literally like magnets, like it was like trying to push like strong magnets against each other, like that resistance. And at the time, like I hadn't had a lot of experiences where I really felt like I was strongly feeling the chi. But all of a sudden, practicing live with that teacher, even though it was online, you felt more chi. And when then the next day, I'm like, I go to redo the practice, and I'm not doing it with Lee, and all of a sudden, it's like I was so surprised, like, wow, I don't really feel the chi very much, and just doing it with a teacher actually makes you feel so much more energy. And so I kind of do it on my own for a while, and maybe like a year later, I decided to go to California to do one of his workshops, and decided to just kind of move there. And I had no plan, and I just got all my stuff and a couple $1,000s I'd saved up and headed over there. And I got really lucky. Like it's just like when you're in the flow, things kind of just happen and pull you in the right direction. And so his assistant was moving to New York. We were like switching coasts. And so he needed a new assistant. And I was like, oh, that's great. I don't have a job, but I just moved here like out of the blue. And so he gave me a job as his assistant and was teaching me and stuff. And I noticed as soon as I was there doing Qigong with him in person, like in his classes, how much stronger the energy was. And eventually I picked his brain about this. And he's like, oh, yeah, well, it's because I'm doing Qigong with you. And so I kind of pull the Qi into the room. And he said he described it like a curtain falling down. Like at a certain point in class, he would switch gears. He'd pull this curtain of Qi down. And all of a sudden the room was just full of like a thicker energy. So as you're like moving through this energy, you could feel it. It's like you were underwater. And it really sped up the rate at which I progressed in my practice. And it kind of sucks because it's like it's hard to find a teacher with that quality where like they're so masterful with the practice that just doing the practice in their presence like makes it you progress like 10 times faster. So it sucks. Like most people probably are like doing it at home from like DVDs or with like their local Qigong teacher who's like kind of experienced, but not like a Qigong master or something, you know? And yeah, it was just amazing how much you could just feel being around him. And he had so many things he did that whatever doubt was in my mind about like, oh, is Qi really real? Like, can people really send Qi and things like this? There's so many things he did. Like he would give me acupuncture. I'd be face down on the bed and he would send Qi up my feet into the kidney 1 point, the bubbling spring, and then leave the room. And the whole hour I'd be laying there with the needles in me, it would feel like his fingers were still there pressing on my foot, sending Qi in. And it's not like he like pressed super hard or for a long time or something, so left some weird nervous system thing. He literally just light as a feather touched the toe for like 5 seconds, sent the Qi in, left the room. And the whole time those points stay buzzing. Or me sitting in a chair and he's like demonstrating for a class on doing like Buddha palm healing on me. He'd go behind me and use his palm and kind of hover over certain points and send Qi into different chakras and find where it's blocked and open it up. But I'm sitting here with my eyes closed. He's behind me. I no way I can tell where he's putting his hand, but I could feel exactly where it was. And I'd be feeling him working a point for a while and turn around. His hand's exactly there. That's where I'm feeling the energy go in. My back is like buzzing in that spot. So he just did all kinds of things like that. He could make an acupuncture needle out of Qi. You just make a needle, put it in you. You would feel it until he took it out, you know? It would be buzzing at that point. He eventually started working on a Qigong system where you literally make electricity in your body. You become like an electrical eel. You pack so much Qi in the Danshan that it like literally turns into a battery that makes so much electricity. You can put a voltometer on the practitioner's skin and measure electrical volts coming out of their body. Like wow. It's like a significant amount. They can literally light up light bulbs with their fingertips. So Lee was training this, but he didn't tell me. I didn't even know this thing existed. And this was kind of early on when I was getting to know him. And one of the things he did was teaching me massage, body work as part of my training with him. And so I'm just giving him a massage. And because he was kind of early in this system, he didn't have full control over the electricity. So sometimes it would just jump out of his dantian into other parts of his body. And so I'm giving him a massage and the electricity just jumps out of his body up into my body. And I was still dealing with skin conditions at the time. I had this big boil on my arm. And this electricity jumped to the boil and just stayed there. Even when I wasn't touching him, it was just burning this boil. It felt like somebody was holding a lit cigarette against my skin for like
Whoa.
30 minutes. And the next day, the boil just totally disappeared. And it had been there for weeks. And I'd been doing all kinds of shit to try to get rid of it. Just totally disappears. I didn't even think to tell Lee about this until like months later. We were shooting a video. That was part of what I did for my job with him, was filming for him, which is why I can do that now, which is really lucky. But while we're filming, we're outside. We're at Yosemite, this like beautiful mountain range. He's doing qigong, and every once in a while, his like hand jerks, and it looked like he was getting bit by flies, but we couldn't say anything because we were trying to keep quiet for the video. And once the video was done, I'm like, Lee, are you getting bit by flies? Like, I didn't notice any, and nothing was biting me or anyone else on set. And he's like, oh no, it's because I'm doing qigong and the electricity is jumping out of the dantian, and I'm actually electrocuting myself by accident. It was just jumping to his fingertips. I'm like, holy crap. I'm like, wait, did I ever tell you that your body electrocuted me once and cured one of my boils? And he's like, oh yeah, that kind of thing happens. So, and then those are some of the things I had directly experienced with him. But other things were just stories, like when he had his third kid. Before he even knew that his wife was pregnant, the ghost, I guess, of the kid was like bouncing around the walls and literally pulled the sheets off the bed. Like actually interacted physically, ripped the sheets off the bed. And then like a couple of days later, his wife's like, oh yeah, I'm pregnant. Now his fourth kid that he just had like a few months ago, there's some crazy story, and I don't exactly remember it, but it kind of goes like this, that he had a dream that he met this old Chinese woman, and that she was telling him, oh, I'm about to be reincarnated as your daughter. And actually, it was slightly before this. His wife or girlfriend or whoever's having the baby had a dream of this tree, and I can't remember the exact type of tree, but it was something like a white lotus tree, white something or other tree. It had like white flowers or something. And then a few days later, Lee has a dream that he meets this old Chinese woman who tells him, oh yeah, I'm about to be reincarnated as your daughter. My name is, I can't remember what it was, Mo or some Chinese word. And Lee wakes up, he looks up what the word means, and it's the name of this tree, right? And he tells his wife, and his wife is like, oh, I just had a dream about that type of tree, right? Mm-hmm. So they both had these independent dreams of this thing. And a couple of days later, he could actually feel the soul of the person go into the... He's a pretty amazing dude, but you'll never hear any of this. All his products and everything, he's usually just like, oh yeah, Qigong. It's not too esoteric. Like he kind of tries, he really softens it, It's like, oh, it's just working with your nervous system, He really does a good job getting, let's say, muggles to get in.
Yeah. That's brilliant. It really, there's so many parallels to the experience that I've had in my life, and one of those experiences was that I wrote a book, and it's published on Amazon Kindle. It's called Elwyn, the Path of the Young Wizard, and it still needs to be edited a bit more to make it read a bit better because various reasons. But one of the things in the book was this book was all channeled. So I had this experience where I had this dream after a beautiful, beautiful day and night on Haleakala, the sacred mountain in Maui. And that night I had this dream of this magnificent lifetime, and it was experiencing this lifetime, this past lifetime on another planet. And it was a planet where you could, chi was like, you could make it physical, and it's not just invisible. It's literally, I could light a fire like this. And I won't say the name yet for reasons I'll reveal, but there's this powerfully mystical woman in this story, and her name was the same name that my wife, when she talked about meeting our soul child, which my psychic master had told me I had experienced, that we had these two soul children kind of around us. We connected with them in meditation. the name that she said that she heard was the name of the woman in this book.
Wow.
Before she read the book.
Wow.
So she told me about this, and I'm like, that is literally a character in a book that I wrote.
Wow.
And there's not that many characters in the book. it's like not that many opportunities, and it's a name that you don't really hear too often either. But it was so one of those moments where you just have to sit back and kind of have that inner smile and connecting with it. But I want to go back to a bit of talking about your experience with your teacher. Is when you described all the things that he was doing with energy, not only was it really beautiful and really you could feel the genuine experience that you had, but it also reminded me that a lot of people have Qigong teachers that the teacher themselves might not even know they're doing Qigong, or the student themselves might not even know that they have this sort of special teacher. And I'd like everyone who's listening to this to kind of reflect on teachers in their life. Even they don't even have to have a teacher role. It could be a friend or family member, somebody who kind of does this magic. They have this vibe, they have this ability to do things that shifts the energy in the room. And that person you can learn Qigong from. You don't have to just learn from a Qigong teacher. You can learn this emotional, spiritual, psychological, physical, metaphysical alchemy from everyone and everything.
Very true.
There we have it. And we're coming to that that time towards the end of tea and qi, where the tea has processed through my body and is starting to become pee. But before we go, I'd love for, if you're up for it, to just share if you'd like to share a bit of a simple qigong exercise for everyone watching to try out at home.
Sure. I guess people are watching visually, yeah. Well, I just posted on my YouTube channel one called Qigong for Beginners. So that's if you just search my name on YouTube, that's easy to find. But I'll just show a exercise from that. It's kind of inconvenient with these headphones. Well, you can almost do this without even hearing, but kind of the foundation of Qigong is most of the Qi we work with. What you see with Qigong, people moving their arms around in all kind of fancy ways. The movement of the arms, legs, it's mostly to work the flow of energy through the torso. Most of our emotional experience or into vital organs, everything is in the torso. So a lot of what you see with the Qigong movements, however kind of fancy they look, they're usually trying to move the Qi somewhere through the torso, from the hips, pelvis, heart, gut, these kind of areas. A really simple one to work that flow just involves lifting the hands up and down. So you lift up to just above your heart, turn the palms face down, hands sink down to about the pelvis. And this is basically connecting two main regions of the body: the fire region, the heart, the fire representing the kind of ethereal nature of the mind and emotions. And it's connecting it to the water region. We kind of consider the lower abdomen, the pelvis, which is more your physical energy. Physical is kind of like a nice word for it, kind of the PG word, but really it's your sexual energy that represents your sort of physicality. We're basically here connecting water and fire. So we just exhale as the hands press down. Inhale as the hands lift up. Exhale, press down. Hear the breath. Should be all through the nose, in and out. Inhale as we lift up. And so the part of us that is more like fire, energy that rises and expands, our passion, our inspiration, merging that with the part of us that's more like water, that sinks and settles, that can be calm and relaxed. And as we move the hands, you can think about the body moving a little bit. Like we actually lift and open the chest slightly as the hands come up. I think of sinking the tailbone. If you're seated, just sinking the chest a little as the hands come down. So all this coming together, the movement in the torso, the hands, and the breath coming together to balance the rising and sinking nature of our chi. You can end with hands over the water center. So we tend to focus on more on the Taoist arts as that water nature. The ability to sink the mind, the breath, the chi, this area we often call the dantian. Just feel your breath there. And relax. Good. A really simple one. Easy enough to do as a little chi break through the day or just when you're waking up or before bed or something. Yeah.
Thank you so much for being on the show today, Nick. Learned so much from you. It's been great to share energy and just been great meeting you as well, because this is the first time we've actually spoken.
Yeah, it's been fun. I always find people in the Qigong world are often the most interesting people to talk to. Not just because we have Qigong in common, but it just kind of attracts really weird, interesting people. So I always appreciate conversations.
Yeah, it's just a magnet for the mystical. Qigong is it's just a magnet for supernatural.
Yeah.
Whether you're spiritual and you call it psychic, or whether you're a hardcore scientist and you call it psycho, same waters, baby, same waters. Yeah. It's just the mystics swim in the waters, and the people who
schizophrenics drown.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining, Nick. I'm gonna put your tag in the bio, and also anyone who wants to check out your YouTube videos, they can find you at Nick Loffree Qigong. Is that right?
On YouTube, if you just put Nick Loffree, I'm the only Nick Loffree in the world, so that's easy enough. The title is actually Nick Loffree Bioenergetic Health. It's me trying to appeal to that more scientific minded, but it probably just sounds new agey. Bioenergetic.
Sounds like something like some sort of alternative health treatment you could get in Switzerland.
It does sound like that, yeah. Actually, interestingly, I found out recently a lot of this stuff came from Germany, the kind of like Western, more Western sort of holistic medicine. Apparently, a lot of it started in Germany in the period before the Nazis. Yeah, and a lot of them like immigrated to the United States and started sharing a lot of. I don't remember what it was like. Yeah, homeopathy, things like that. So apparently, a lot of them came out of Germany.
Yeah, shout out to my
topic for another talk.
Shout out to my German Swiss ancestors. Yeah. Because there was also a lot of, I won't go too far into this is just an ending point, but Germany also had a lot of influence from Asia at one point in time when Mongolia stretched into a massive empire. Germany was like over here and getting that cultural influence.
Interesting.
So yeah, oh, it's so great. In Switzerland and Germany, they have so much holistic and Eastern healthcare. So good, and it's so pleasant to see that 360-degree turn they went from being dark sorcerers in World War II, where Hitler was a massive psychotic mystic. He was really into esoteric stuff, and now
It
they're
was,
big
yeah.
into Germany's big into massage therapy and acupuncture and qigong. So
Yeah, yeah, and their government like sponsors it too. You can like if you just say you're depressed, you get like a month paid vacation to like go to a health spa, something like that.
yeah, my friend Hannah is Swiss, and she gets like 20 days where she can go and like on vacation on a holistic health retreat. I'm like, why did my ancestors move? Why didn't they stay in Switzerland?
Yeah, I think just living in Switzerland is a health retreat.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely
Mountains and
beautiful.
stuff.
Oh, that
But
was
I think I moved to the Switzerland of America. So,
yeah, man, enjoying those mountains.
yeah, it's sweet. All right, good talk. Hope people enjoy.
Yeah, good talking with you, Nick, and she and namaste to everyone watching. All right, and there we go.